What are the 5 big questions in composition? Good morning to you. In this lesson, we will prepare for the final exam in Composition 1 by reviewing some questions and criteria that all writers should know. So come along. What are the big questions that writers should know? Well, writers should be able to answer accurately the following 5 questions if they are to succeed as writers in the academy, in their professions, in the ministry, or any time writers make use of writing to generate ideas, organize ideas, and communicate a message. Well, we should look at the questions about process. What are the stages in the writing process? About genre. What is the genre of the essay? Goals. What makes a claim informed and persuasive? Integration. What are frames for integrating sources of information? And revision. What do experienced writers do when they revise? Now let me suggest that you compose your answers to these questions in your word processing program before starting the exam. Then after you have composed and saved your answers, you can paste your 5 answers one at a time into the exam's text blocks. Well, the exam asks you to write 5 well-formed and well-informed short answer paragraphs, 1 paragraph per question. You should style paragraphs according to thesis, analysis, synthesis, as we have learned. The thesis should be the topic sentence that answers the question directly and clearly. For analysis, try explaining the relationships, definitions to distinctions, processes, causes, key terms, elements, parts, and relevant examples and quotations, cited when you cite sources using Turabian parenthetical citation, which you can find in a Manual for Writers, Chapter 19. And then synthesis, a summary sentence plus application or illustration. So in addition to answering the question directly and clearly, please answer your question in a brief example drawn from your experience as a writer who has worked through the crafts and drafts of the writing process. And do your best as always. Well, as a craft, writing is a verb, that is a process. And the better the process, the better the final product, the noun produced. Writers who understand the writing process plan better and work more efficiently and effectively, saving themselves time and avoiding failures. Well, first, let's look at invention, which is 50% of one's time, effort, and energies. Invention involves research and analysis toward filling out the argument box's template conceptually and often physically, as I have required in this class. Invention includes discovering and defining the research question, considering and proposing a thesis statement, and creating or discovering reasons and evidence to support and recommend one's thesis. Invention involves identifying one's target readers and seeking to address their questions, concerns, and reservations. So invention is a large part of the writing process, and we have focused on that, learning in our class, learning invention through narrative, poetic analysis, argument analysis, and rhetorical analysis. Now, drafting is 10% of energy. It involves outlining and sketching one's ideas, getting it down on paper or in the document. Then one seeks to develop the draft as much as possible with reasons, insights, evidence, facts, testimony, and so forth. Now, critique is a third and very important 5% of one's energy, in which one seeks out informed feedback and critical dialogue so that one can create a revision plan toward improving the essay. Now, without critique, one cannot do revision very well. And revision is a large 25% of the writing process in which a writer re-sees the essay and reimagines its potential. Revising is not editing. Let me repeat, revising is not editing. When revising, a writer thinks globally about the quality of the argument, its arrangement, and its effectiveness or helpfulness in convincing target readers of the truth or benefit of one's thesis statement. Global revision concerns improving the argument. Local revision concerns styling paragraphs and sentences effectively. Now, editing, finally, accounts for the final 10% of time and effort, depending on one's skill level. When editing, one pays attention to sentence level clarity, correctness, and concision, that is, reducing wordiness, as well as rechecking citation of sources of information and rechecking document design and titles for correctness and effectiveness. So see Rules for Writers, chapters 1 through 4, on this writing process. Well, second, I define the essay as a question-answer genre involving a mode of inquiry and writing process. Successful writers always understand their genre, for writers never just write, but write in genres, usually established genres. Well, when writing the essay genre, writers make 5 key moves, but not necessarily in any predetermined neat order. These are the 5 moves one should make in any order to write a successful essay. Moving from a topic to a question, that is a significant research question. Then, moving from the question that you've discovered and want to address to a hypothesis, that is your preliminary guess, a starting answer. Third, you move from the hypothesis to analysis, gathering some good evidence and considering good reasons to support your hypothesis. Then at some point, you'll want to move from your analysis to your final answer, that is your thesis statement. And then consider addressing audience concerns and questions, or knowing for whom you compose and communicate your answer. And see Rules for Writers, chapter 6, for understanding the genre of the essay. What are the 3 rules when valuing real estate? Well, the rules are location, location, location. Likewise, in writing, there are 3 rules. It's problems, problems, problems. A problem is a significant research question, sometimes called an issue. Now, the Turabian team writes this about the importance of understanding one's research question or research problem. If one issue makes or breaks a student research project, it is the quality of the problem that the writer poses. Students with good questions find more useful sources, read more thoughtfully, and make better decisions in planning and drafting their papers. Students with not even a question to answer, much less a good problem to solve, are more likely to wander, to pursue dead ends, to write for themselves, that is expression, rather than their readers, that is communication, and therefore to need more of your guidance, that is the instructor or writing consultant's guidance, along the way, and more extensive feedback at the end. Well, third, writers need to know about argumentation. So what is the difference between offering a mere opinion, writing an informed opinion or claim, and composing a convincing opinion and claim? Well, by opinion or claim, I mean the main claim, usually called the thesis statement, or subordinate claims, usually called reasons. Well, to answer this question well, you should consider a writer's communicative aims or goals. First, who cares about mere opinions? Well, perhaps your sympathetic friends who value your opinion, but others will want more information. So who cares about informed opinions? Well, mostly readers. That is, readers who are enjoying what you're writing. They're not critical readers. That is, they're enjoying the argument, but not analyzing it as they go along. And third, who cares about informed, convincing opinions? Well, critical readers and truth seekers. And what distinguishes these 3 adjectives modifying a claim? Well, the first is just a mere opinion. The second, one makes an argument. And what distinguishes an informed opinion from convincing opinion? Well, I would say it is thinking about one's audience and the audience's needs, their questions, their reservations, and their concerns. And so what distinguishes an argument from a convincing or critical argument is really thinking about one's audience. Okay, now how do writers create strong arguments that convince target readers? And what does Rules for Writers advise about the aims of writers and writing sound arguments? Well, please see Chapter 6 in Rules for Writers. Well, writers, fourthly, know how to integrate their sources of information by attaching quotations to their sentences and then framing the quotations. Well, how do writers integrate sources by framing them? Well, to answer this question sufficiently, you should name and describe the four corners of frames. Illustrate with an example, please, and suggest how frames create coherence, that is, unity. Good writers integrate sources by meaningful frames, and likewise, writers frame entire paragraphs and whole essays. So please see Rules for Writers, Chapter 58 on integrating sources, and that chapter will be a great asset to you as you answer this important question. Well, writers integrate each reference, and by reference I mean a quotation, paraphrase, or summary of sources of information into the sentence, paragraph, or argument with four corners. First, I'll use myself as an example. I introduce the quotation for target readers, usually naming the author, especially important authors that my target readers will recognize. Second, I integrate the quotation into my sentence by choosing a signal phrase plus adding a comma after a phrase or a colon after an independent clause, or by weaving the quotation into the grammar and verbal tense of my sentence. Then I cite, because I am responsible for providing the information from which I found my source of information. Okay, so I cite the quotation at the end of the clause, not directly after the quotation, but after the end of the clause, which is often the end of a sentence, using the correct style of citation, where it's parenthetical citation or a footnote. And lastly, I interpret the quotation accurately to support my claim, or my topic sentence, or my thesis statement, or all of these. So again, please see Rules for Writers, Chapter 58 on integrating quotations. You can avoid being a hit-and-run quoter by framing your quotations, paraphrases, and summaries from the sources of information. In this example, I integrate my quotation. So let's read it. In a 5th century sermon, St. Augustine, or if you're from Florida, St. Augustine, points out, comma, John the Baptizer was a voice for a time. Christ is the eternal word from the beginning. Remove the word, and what is a voice? Close quotation, parenthetical citation, period. Augustine emphasizes that words find value not only in the language idea opposition, but also as human words relate to the eternal word. All right, let's ask some questions about this quotation. Where are the four corners of the frame for this quotation? Well, I introduce the quotation by naming the author right away and providing some context about him. This is a 5th century quotation. And I integrate the quotation by attaching it to my sentence. That is, a quotation should never stand alone, but always needs to be attached to the writer's own sentence, and including a signal phrase, that is, points out, comma. And I add a comma because what precedes the comma is a phrase and not a clause. If I had written St. Augustine points this out, then that would be a clause because I include an object and I would put a colon there instead of a comma. So I cite it as well using parenthetical or classical style citation, and I include my internal punctuation, which is a question mark, and on the right side of the parenthetical citation I end the sentence with a period. And I also interpret the quotation. I don't just stop with a period at the end of my quotation, but I interpret it in a way that supports my thesis statement. Okay. Well, what is the tense? Well, my signal phrase is St. Augustine points out. I did not write St. Augustine pointed out. That would be the past tense, but I write or use the literary present tense, because every time I read a work, for example, one by St. Augustine, he speaks to me in the present tense every time I open the page. And so a writer's voice is always a living voice. And this is something that you see modeled or practiced in the scripture. And finally, where is the punctuation? I hope I have pointed that out. Fifth, revision is not a bad word, but a good word, and good writers plan to revise as part of the writing process. So what is revision? Well, as already mentioned, revision is 25% of the writing process in which a writer re-sees the essay and reimagines its potential. Revision is not editing, but revision focuses on the essay's success at the argument and paragraph levels, reviewing the quality of the thesis and the whole argument supporting the thesis, which the writer recommends to readers. Well, consider how novice or inexperienced writers view revision, and then contrast that view with how experienced writers view revision and plan to revise. What do seasoned writers do when they revise? Well, when revising, a writer thinks globally about the quality of the argument, arrangement, and the needs of target readers. There are two types of revision. Global revision concerns the improvement of the argument, and local revision concerns styling paragraphs and sentences effectively. You can look at Rules for Writers, Chapter 3, about the revision process. Well, when revising, experienced writers try to find and develop their argument in view of target readers. Writers ask rhetorical or communicative type questions of their drafts. What important question am I trying to answer? That is, what's my research question? And what's my thesis, message, or main claim that answers that question? And do I answer it clearly and directly so that target readers understand the significance of my thesis? And what kind of question and thesis is it? And here I'm referring to stasis theory, whether it's one of fact or causation, definition, whether it's one of quality, or whether it's a solution. And how have others answered this question? And how does my answer relate to or go beyond what others have said about this question? And how can I compose a convincing case with reasons and evidence? And have I addressed my readers' questions, concerns, and reservations? So these are the types of questions that a writer asks when revising an essay. As a reminder, a thesis does a certain kind of work in an essay, or according to Rules for Writers' excellent definition, a thesis is often one or more of the following: the answer to a question you have posed, the resolution or solution of a problem you have identified, or a statement that takes a position on a debatable topic. Well, when revising, one should ask, what makes an effective thesis? Well, a quality research question, like an effective thesis, has four characteristics. It's concrete, not too general in its terms, but as concrete or specific as possible. It's narrow, not too broad for the project, but qualified and manageable in scope for your project. It's challenging or significant, not too bland or obvious, but connected to problems or offering insights. It's grounded, not too speculative, but capable of being supported with relevant evidence. And strive for these qualitative criteria for your question and your answer, your problem and your solution. The most interesting and challenging thesis statements usually pose a solution to a problem or position in a debate within a topic. Please see Rules for Writers chapters 2A and 53A. Finally, I encourage you to enroll in Composition 2 during your freshman or sophomore year. Composition 2 is our research writing class where we practice research writing through literature. It focuses on literary analysis of major genres with excellent, rich, worthwhile Christian literature or modern or classical literature. We look at the research writing process of works in the historical and critical context. We focus on writing style toward the 5 C's, so your sentences are clear, concise, correct, your sentences coherent, and your whole essays cohesive. All right, and we focus on critical thinking and communication, which is Southeastern's 5th core competency that we want all graduates to become better and better at. And I wish you a Merry Christmas soon enough, and I hope to see you next semester. Right on.